Now, come on, you've known me a while. You know I don't normally go in for any of that cloak and dagger BS. You can leave nonsense like that to our red top colleagues. But then I'm not normally asked to write an article on a secret government agency or some army unit that's likely full of psycho killers. All of which makes it seem like a good idea to leave a trail of breadcrumbs on this one. So if anything happens to me anytime soon, if I disappear or die or whatever, do what you want with this. Might give you or someone else some answers. It all started midway through last year when my editor, he asked me to look into something a little bit niche. He'd been sent an anonymous email, purportedly from the relative of some fellow who served in the RAF during World War II. Before he passed away, this fellow had told his family about 2 RAF bases, both of which had been completely wiped out during the war. Like, completely wiped out. No survivors wiped out. That in itself was a little bit odd. I mean, you think something like that would be fairly well recorded in the public record. But the next bit was full on mental. It wasn't the Germans who'd done it, but some kind of alien tech that had fallen into the hands of the RAF during the war. It seemed like something right off the Discovery Channel. But the editor, he asked me just to scratch the surface, just see if there's anything we could do with it, if there was some sort of piece we could run on it. In truth, I think it's still part of my penance for that undercover sting story from last year. The one that went wrong with the sheikh. So off I went, go and do some inquiries. And from the get-go, this one just seemed really off. The 2 air bases in question, they're long gone now. One was a resupply and engineering place just outside Cardiff. That's an industrial estate now. The other was a fighter interceptor base out in the middle of nowhere up in Scotland. That's nothing but fields these days. I'd never heard of either of them. I mean, that in itself isn't unusual. There were hundreds of air bases during the war, and a lot of them, the only people who can remember them are the guys who served there. So I started doing some checks with my usual contacts in the military, and I was able to confirm the bases had been bombed during the war, and they'd been decommissioned shortly after. But there was a real lack of detail in the reports I was reading. A lot of redaction, not much information on the names, number of casualties. It's the sort of stuff that's usually the first thing you come across. So I went deeper, threw in a couple of Freedom of Information Act requests. Nothing. All the stuff I was getting back should have been declassified years ago. And here I am, just hitting brick walls that shouldn't be there. Well, you know I'm not one to give up. So I went out on the road, knocked some doors, phoned at veterans associations. Got me absolutely nowhere. So I had no alternative other than to approach that contact I've got, the one in the intel services, the chap who fed me that info we used for that Iraq war exclusive. And that's when things just got really nuts. He's always had a bit of a taste for the theatric. Nothing sent by email, no texts. It's always burner phones and nocturnal meetings in secluded locations. He's not cheap either. So when he meets up with me in this underground car park, throws this folder full of papers in my car and drives off. That wasn't unusual. But the stuff in it, insane. The alien stories turned out just to be the tip of the iceberg. There were reports of the British Army during World War II encountering ghosts, time slips, and ancient monsters. Bloody hell, there was even a whole section devoted to some race of underwater warriors from Atlantis that used magnetic technology. Now, it did occur to me, this could either just be a wind-up on my contact's part, or a load of the usual fake internet conspiracy nonsense, Bigfoot stole my wife, that kind of thing. But there was the same military unit connected to all the reports. It's called the 4th Logistics Company, which is funny, because when I did some more checking, there'd never been a 1st, 2nd or 3rd logistics company, just a 4th. And the historical footprint of that unit, well, it didn't have a lot to do with logistics. They'd have been better off calling them the 4th Cannon Fodder Unit for how many guys they lost. And yet, they never seemed to have fought in a major World War II battle. There were a couple of names which kept cropping up across the various reports. The most common one was a naval officer named Shepherd. From doing some research into his family tree, his military record, Stanley Shepherd joined the Royal Navy prior to World War II, not long before. When it started, he was serving as a gunnery officer on board a destroyer, H-class, named HMS Hardy. The Hardy was one of 5 ships which attacked a German force in the Norwegian port of Narvik in April of 1940. Successful from what I can see, but unfortunately they were ambushed on the way back home by a German force, and the Hardy came off worse. Shepherd's turret, the one he was commanding, was knocked out, and everybody else in it was killed. He sustained pretty significant injuries in the process, scarred for life, apparently. But they recovered him, and got him back to the UK, and then things start to get a bit murky. There's some reference to him being posted to another ship, the Mendacious, but I can't find anything on that boat. It wasn't a warship I can see. And then in August of 1940, so only a couple of months after the Hardy's been sunk, his name, Shepherd, crops up again as the only survivor in the disaster. This was another destroyer, HMS Warsaw, and it was lost off the coast of Scotland in an incident involving a German U-boat. And apparently, those Atlanteans that I mentioned, the ones with the magnets and some such. As if losing 2 entire crews wasn't bad enough, Shepherd seems to have been co-opted by the Navy to head up this 4th Logistics Unit from that point onwards. He's referenced in a series of briefings that were given to the Home Secretary during the war, delivered by an army bloke named Elliot, who appears to have been part of the same unit from what I can see. There's a couple of reports that Shepherd seems to have written and turned in for missions down at Wormwood Scrubs in London, and then up at some fuel depot near Invergordon. Really weird stuff, proper ghosts and ghoulies and the like. He doesn't present when he writes as being a particularly happy chap, but then I guess when you're the only survivor of 2 shipwrecks, you're not going to be, are you, I suppose? Then in October of 42, looks like he was killed during an accident or an incident of some sort at a training ground down in Essex. Couldn't find any details. They're still fully redacted way past the point where they should have been released. At that point, another chap called Armitage seems to have taken over the unit. In a bit of a twist, someone seems to have seen fit to give him the code name of Shepherd, probably in a tribute to poor old Sydney. So for the second half of the war, there's still references into the reports of a Shepherd, but it's actually this Armitage fella using the call sign instead. There's this whole other bloody subsection in there where this 4th Logistics Unit have been tasked to investigate a weapons company, Tipton Manufacturing. Seems that somebody in the Navy was pretty damn suspicious of where Tipton's money had come from and why they were so good at designing high-tech weapons. Looks like some employees of the weapons firm and some soldiers from the logistics unit might have knocked heads a couple of times during some incidents, with the Tipton boys coming out on top. From doing some digging, Tipton are a family company, and they go way back. I mean, like centuries back, and they're still working on weapons for the UK government today. They're half based here and half based over in Germany, and they're linked to some really out there stuff like teleportations and time travel theory, which is all just another component when you find that it's featured in a folder full of vampire war criminals and zombie skeleton monsters. I'm going to try and head down to that site in Essex where Shepherd came a cropper. Foulness it's called, which seems an apt name. I also want to head over to Cardiff, do some door knocking around that old RAF base, see if someone's got a nan or a granddad who remembers the incident. But, I'm uneasy. I can't tell if this 4th Logistics Company was disbanded after the war, or maybe it was just renamed as something else and it's still around. So I'm going to do a recording like this every so often, stash it, and just leave the details where you can find them. Just in case. Anyway, wish me luck, Chief.